I'm Carleigh, and I'm the director of the video you're about to watch. After the filming of these interviews, there was a shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh that killed 11 people. We here at the Merchant of Venice want to express our deepest sympathies to the victims as well as their families, and we hope that through this production and through these videos we can explore the history and prevalence of anti-Semitism in our culture. The Merchant of Venice was written by Shakespeare and first performed in 1605. Unlike Romeo and Juliet or Hamlet, The Merchant of Venice raises a little more suspicion due to its charged and controversial themes, namely the play's relationship with anti-Semitism. As a result, it's important to take a deeper look at the historical context of the play, so we can then ask ourselves, is this play still relevant today?
In England, officially there are no Jews. So Jews were expelled from England by King Edward I in 1290, and they are not really readmitted. I think it's essentially Oliver Cromwell in around 1655, 1656.
So any Jews that were there were obviously going to lie low. They weren't legally there. So he wasn't basing himself on direct experience. He couldn't say some of my best friends are Jewish. The stereotype of Jews was certainly still there, and it is the one we see in Shylock.
It was more Shakespeare imagining what Jewish culture may have been like, based on all of these other tropes and abstractions and caricatures that were made about Jews through all the various culture and books that he would have had access to at the time.
There was an adaptation called The Jew of Venice, produced in 1701 by George Granville, and that was a fairly popular interpretation that got performed a fair bit. And that one kind of takes what modern readers see as sort of the darker elements and kind of perhaps what modern audiences would see as moral ambiguity in the play, and kind of like neatens it all out. Like, Shylock is just a straightforward villain, and Antonio and Bassiano are exemplars of the virtue of friendship. And as far as I can tell, like, this tradition of playing Shylock either as a straightforward villain or as like a comic villain is kind of the dominant mode throughout the next century or so.
I think very recently, that is in the last, 20 years, 30 years perhaps, people have given a second look at Shylock in the way that Shakespeare actually described him as far as a character. And I think they're starting to believe that Shakespeare had something else in mind, as he often does when he writes the villains.
One thing Shakespeare did do is he gave Shylock that great speech, "Hath not a Jew eyes," where he makes the case for the common humanity of non-Jews and Jews.
If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge?
I think most notably, there were a lot of productions in Nazi Germany and Austria, and broadcasts of the play sort of being used for propagandistic purposes leading up to World War II. I think one interesting thing that I came across was actually the history of Hebrew and Yiddish adaptations. The play had some popularity in the Yiddish theater in the US in around the turn of the 20th century. That kind of speaks to the sort of importance of the symbol, like that this was a familiar literary work that people felt the need to sort of reclaim.
Any way that you can bring these portrayals of an oppressed person to the stage, to the screen, with this level of complexity that Shylock gives us. Yes, he's not a great person, but at the same time, if he can evoke even a moment of pity in us, if we can see him as a potential, if we can see the play revolving around him as being a tragedy, if we can see his suffering and the pathos that he experiences as something that's still meaningful to us, I think that it works.